Hey team, what's up? I just thought this might be helpful for some folks, especially people who don't have a lot of tools of their own at home, or like me, live in an apartment and don't have a place to work. This project that I'm working on, I kind of had to have material pre-cut for me. So I went to Home Depot because at least around here, they're the only ones who will cut both plywood and lumber for you. A couple of tips from my experience that might be useful for you. For my project, I've got a little bit of leeway in terms of accuracy. The stuff doesn't have to be totally perfect. I'll be able to make it work if it doesn't. But I realized a couple of things that will make it as accurate as possible and make it as efficient as possible and friendly as possible for the people you're working with at Home Depot. Because you also don't know what their time's like and what their skill level's like, so try to set them up for success. So the first thing I did was, for the panels, I went ahead and marked them with a line, and then I put a V or a check on the side that I wanted the blade to be on. And then I measured the 3 cuts that I needed, and I just accounted for the blade thickness. I think in the end, I probably underestimated the amount the blade would take off because my second and third pieces are a little bit small, but again, for this project, I'll be able to make it work. It's going to be fine. But the good thing is that the pieces are the same width, so that part is fine. It's just they're a little bit smaller than I wanted. So pre-marking, and what I did was I brought my tape measure in, and I brought pencil and a speed square, and that way I can make a really clear, sharp line and make that mark right at the top of the sheet, because the saw they use comes from the top down. And then I had to have a couple of the pieces broken in half, so I said just cut them at 24 inches. A sheet of plywood's 48, so 24 and 24, and these are all going to be for individual pieces of the project, so they don't have to go together. They can all be a little bit different from each other. So if it's one is 24 and the other one's 23 and 7/8, or somewhere in those realms, that's going to be fine for me. But it's just something to know, that panel saw, you can cut really accurately on them. I have found that at Home Depot they don't cut so accurately, but what I was impressed with was the one sheet, the first cut that I needed to be 32 inches, and it's right on the money. There's just a little bit of pencil line left, which is great. That's basically what I wanted. So clear instructions, pre-marking what you can is great. Moving on to the lumber, I had a cut list of my own based on kind of how I would have done the lumber. I asked the guy who was cutting for me, I said, what's the best way for you to do this? Do you mark them all out in advance? Or do you measure one at a time? And what I learned from that is to basically just request that they measure them one at a time. So my first cut was 45 inches. So he measured 45 inches, cut it, brought the pieces out, measured the next one, which was 30 or 32 or something, cut that one, and that way you're not trying to predict the saw kerf, and you can get a more accurate cut. And those pieces that he cut are dead on. They're well within a 16th, which is, for me, is going to be fine, and basically that's all you can hope for. Some of them are dead on, and some of them are a 32nd one way or 3/64 one way, but none of them are actually a 16th difference. So I'm pretty happy with that. That's pretty good. But that's the method, because if they were to sort of pull the tape measure and go 45, 32, 18, 16, or whatever it is, they're going to vary a little bit, and then the kerf of the blade itself is going to be 1/8 of an inch, something like that. And so there's going to be a lot of creep in the measurement, and they'll start to jumble the sizes. They won't be dead on. So the last thing that he wanted me to do, but also as I thought about it made a lot of sense, is to actually sort of chart out what you want and try to think of it in terms of having them cut 2 at the same time. So if you have a lot of the same measurements, I had 2 at 45, 2 at 30, 2 at 32, 4 at 24, all those kinds of things. So I basically sort of just made a little grid and said, okay, I had 6 boards, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I said, okay, this first pair of 1 and 2 is going to be 45, 45. So the first will be 45, but it'll be through 2 pieces. And then even if those measurements are like a little off, he did a really nice job squaring the butts, so they're still the same size, right? So they're very, very close. There's a slight difference, which again is going to be fine for this. So that means that instead of cutting 45 on a board one way and then 45 on another board another way, they're cut the same. So even if they're a little bit under 45 or a little bit over 45, they're the same to each other, which for my project was a more important thing than the very specific measurement. So try to, if you've got several pieces of lumber to cut, try to make it so that they can cut through 2 boards and get the pieces that you want. Along with being very polite and patient with them and trying to set them up so that everything's relatively easy. Those are a couple of tips that I have. They also told me that they can't cut a piece under 24 inches. It says 12 inches, but they basically need 12 on each side of the cut for the way the saw is clamped. It's got a lot of safety features, and they have to clamp the wood in and back away from it and just use the handle. And if it's under 12 inches, it's not safe for them to do. It won't work. So for instance, I had pieces that I wanted to cut that were 19, and I wanted to cut 16 out of it, and he couldn't do it. So I'm gonna have to do that here in the back of my pickup truck with a skill saw, which will be fine. At least it's a manageable piece, right? Like I can deal with that. This is out behind my storage unit, so I can't really set up shop here. My apartment's just across town, so this is what I've got for a workspace, but I got all of this work done for me by just being, very thorough, having my measurement. I went in with my measurements ahead of time. I knew what I was going to need for my cut list. So, and then it was just about organizing the cut list. So, for what it's worth, I thought that might be helpful for folks who maybe are in the same sort of situation as I am, and maybe kind of haven't done a lot of this before. You're working on projects, so I hope it's helpful, and have fun building whatever you're building. Cheers.